Have you ever watched a movie and then Googled the actor's IMDb only to have your world shattered because you find out the actor was a Scientologist or something? Then it just completely ruins that actor for you. Well, I'm about to do the exact same thing, only with your favorite author. Now think, who is your favorite author? Maybe they were a good person, or maybe they were dickheads with beautiful prose style. Let's find out, shall we? Welcome to Sorry, I'm About to Ruin Your Favorite Author. Percy Shelley, no need to bless me, I didn't sneeze, is often painted as this rebellious, progressive, anti-monogamous, radical poet. And yeah, he was, but he was also the original love bomber. Let's start with his first wife, Harriet Westbrook. He married her when she was 16 and he was 19, which was creepy even then. He claimed to love her, but pretty quickly he got bored, declared monogamy a scam, and started ghosting her while writing essays about free love and the tyranny of marriage, the founding father of gaslighting. Then, while still married to Harriet, he met Mary Godwin, who you may know better as Mary Shelley, the genius who wrote Frankenstein. And he basically said, hey, want to run away to Europe and write poems while I occasionally fuck your stepsister? Mary was 16, Percy was 21. He had a type. It was 16-year-olds. And yes, they brought her stepsister, Claire Claremont, along for the ride. Percy told Mary he just wanted to have a purely platonic soul connection with Claire, which is Victorian fuckboy for I'm definitely fucking your sister. Meanwhile, back in London, Harriet, his actual wife, was pregnant and abandoned. She later drowned herself, and Percy's response was, wow, that's so sad. Anyways, I guess time to get custody of those damn kids. It'll be great PR. His behavior didn't exactly improve after marrying Mary. He cheated on her, spent most of his marriage chasing muses, and wrote letters trying to orchestrate threesomes with Mary and Claire. Gives a new meaning to sister wives. He drowned in a storm at sea, which is dramatic as fuck, and when his body washed up, Mary kept his heart wrapped in paper in her desk drawer. So I guess eventually his heart was owned by only one woman. A man saying marriage is an oppressive institution while trying to get you and your stepsister into a throuple is one way to weaponize feminism. Next up is the man who gave you 1984, Animal Farm, and about 16 existential crises by the time you were a junior in high school. George Orwell is often seen as this brilliant, prophetic genius who saw it all coming, and yeah, sure, but he was also an asshole. Now, to his credit, he did fight in the Spanish Civil War, but the other soldiers hated him and found him annoying. Do you know how bad you have to be to kill the vibe during war? He came back and immediately wrote a book, Homage to Catalonia, that basically said everyone who is supposed to be on the same side as me is corrupt and stupid, and I hate them all, in layman's terms. Also, he was a snitch. During the Cold War, Orwell handed over a literal list of suspected communists to British intelligence. Just gave them a list of names like, here are some people who might be a threat to democracy, and or wrote a poem I didn't like. So yeah, Big Brother is watching, but apparently so was Orwell. If the thin mustache didn't give it away, he was a rapist. In 1921, he attempted to rape his friend Jacinta. She fought him and ran home with a torn skirt and bruised hip. Orwell married his first wife, Eileen, and proceeded to emotionally neglect her while writing his depressing as fuck books. He later proposed to multiple women after she died, because grief makes you do that, I guess. And by propose, I mean he was like, I'm dying of tuberculosis. Will you be my nurse and my wife? R.I.P. Orwell, you would have hated Love Island and barrel jeans. Lord Byron wasn't just a poet, he was a full-blown celebrity. a sex icon and an absolute fucking menace to society. He was described by one woman as mad, bad, and dangerous to know, which, funnily enough, is a quote I saw in a guy's Tinder profile, but when I called him Lord Byron, he was confused. Fucking poser. Let's start with the basics. Byron slept with everyone. Men, women, people in between, probably a statue or two. He did not discriminate, even when it came to his half-sister. His sex life was so chaotic that he was forced to leave England in 1816 because of the rumors. The year without a summer didn't stop Lord Byron from throwing it back in the tavern. Do you know how freaked out you have to be for the British aristocracy, a group not known for their moral compass, to say, you gotta go? You're still thinking about the half-sister thing, aren't you? Okay, so he may or may not have had a sexual relationship with his half-sister, Augusta Lee. I know. And not only did he maybe hook up with her, he wrote her love poems and named his daughter after her, which is fucking gross. Speaking of his daughter, he had a child with his wife, Annabella Milbank, and then proceeded to treat her like absolute dog shit. He emotionally abused her, mocked her intelligence, and told people she was insane. Meanwhile, he couldn't even handle someone criticizing his chin. I've got a butt chin too, baby bye, I get it. Baby bye was petty as fuck. When Cambridge wouldn't let him keep a dog, instead of just moving on like a normal person, he was like, fine, here's a bear. A bear. He was so obsessed with his image that he would starve himself for weeks to fit into tight pants and then chug vinegar because he thought it helped with weight loss. Ozempic before Ozempic. Baby Bye did some good things like fighting in the Greek War of Independence and funding the revolution, and he looked good as fuck doing it too. He was like if Pete Davidson and Timmy Chalamet merged together to create a bisexual Victorian nympho who caused you to need a nap and an STD test and a priest after every hangout. Our next heartthrob is my sexual awakening, the reason I have a thing for lit bros with middle parts. He's the writer of the only book you finished in high school. I'm, of course, talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald. His villain origin story starts with Zelda Sayer, aka his wife, muse, and emotional punching bag. F. Scott was obsessed with her. If paparazzi existed back then, they would have been caught drinking gin for breakfast and making public scenes at jazz clubs. He once stole her diary and used it verbatim in his work without her permission. But when Zelda tried to write her own stuff, he blocked her, criticized her, sabotaged her, because people won't know you're a plagiarizer if the person you're plagiarizing isn't published. He also had a talent for getting absolutely obliterated and turning every social event into a live-action meltdown. There's a famous story where he and Zelda showed up to a party, jumped into the fountain, and then accused everyone else of being boring. And I mean, they were valid in that. He also loved to leech off of wealthier friends, especially Ernest Hemingway, who, we'll get to him later. Hemingway once said that Fitzgerald's penis was so small it caused him emotional issues. Toxic masculinity, table for two. Fitzgerald idolized rich people while resenting them, which, to be fair, is relatable. He died broke, depressed, and convinced he was a failure, which is fair and deeply on brand for a man who once said, "There are no second acts in American lives." Spoiler alert, that quote is fake. So, I'm sorry if I ruined him, but he's still my favorite author. I didn't ruin him for me. Moving on to the man who made typewriters, hallucinogens, and paranoia into a brand, Hunter S. Thompson. Let's start with the obvious. Yes, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is iconic, and the man could write like he sold his soul, and fuck, maybe he did, but if your favorite author describes his writing process as start drinking at 3 p.m. and add cocaine hourly until sunrise, maybe that's not a mentally stable person. The man didn't just dabble in drugs, he took them the way most people take vitamins. His daily routine included cocaine, Chivas Regal, more cocaine, some LSD, coffee, chartreuse, more alcohol, cigarettes, writing for like 10 minutes, and then watching porn and lighting things on fire. I wish I were exaggerating, but this is a published schedule, like with timestamps. He once said, "I hate to advocate drugs, alcohol, violence, and insanity to anyone, but they've always worked for me." Hunter S. Thompson was a gun guy in the worst possible way. Like, he'd write while shooting at things. He literally blew up his typewriter once because it disrespected him. And his poor wife, Sandy, she kept him alive, raised their child, while he wrote gonzo manifestos and hosted orgies in the living room. When she finally left him for verbal abuse, he blamed her. Classic. Luckily, she got off better than the typewriter. He eventually shot himself at his kitchen table while on the phone with his wife, and his suicide note read, "Football season is over." Also, he ran for sheriff of Aspen once and nearly won on a platform of replacing the streets with sod so people could walk barefoot. He called the other candidate a Nazi and shaved his head so he could refer to his opponent as "my long-haired opponent," which is objectively funny. He also almost drowned Bill Murray, and you know what? I'm going to let that one slide. He was a narcissistic, chaotic, drugged-out mess who terrorized the people around him, glamorized addiction, and turned being unstable into a personality trait, but he wore a bucket hat. Next, let's summon the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft and then banish him immediately for being an actual racist nightmare from the depths of cosmic horror and the Rhode Island suburbs. The king of tentacles who made us fear things we can't even describe was the equivalent of a Truth Social comment section in human form. Let's start with the obvious. Lovecraft was a phenomenal horror writer. He basically invented the genre of cosmic dread. He took horror from, "oh no, there's a ghost in my mirror," to "God is actually a many-eyed squid that lives in your nightmares." He may have changed the horror genre, but he was steadfast in his racism. He was disgustingly, unapologetically racist, not like, "oh, he was a product of his time," bullshit people always say. I mean, his cat was literally named the N-word. He wrote poems so offensively racist that they make Mein Kampf look like child's play. He wasn't casually bigoted. He wrote essays about how non-white people were ruining civilization. He hated black people, Jewish people, immigrants, Catholics, you name it. He didn't discriminate. Well, so next time someone tells you Lovecraft's horror is about fear of the unknown, just remember his monsters often represented his fear of racial mixing, immigration, and basically any culture that wasn't Anglo-Saxon, and serving clam chowder in Rhode Island. He lived with his aunts, hated sunlight, and once described himself as a crippled recluse, which is exactly what a fucking vampire would say. And despite being a founding father of modern horror, Lovecraft actually barely published in his lifetime. Most of his fame came after he died, which makes sense because the only thing scarier than his monsters was his personality. Next up is the man who gave us Breakfast at Tiffany's, In Cold Blood, and the most savage social suicide note in American history. I'm talking about the great Truman Capote, who was the kind of person who walked into a room, scanned everyone for weakness, and then mentally filed away in case he needed material. TMZ before TMZ, if you will. Truman rose to fame with his lyrical prose, biting wit, and the uncanny ability to make people love him. In modern terms, he was Gossip Girl with a typewriter instead of a phone. But let's talk about the moment he really earned his "sorry I'm a bitch" badge, which is La Cote Basque. This is the literary equivalent of flipping a dinner table on Real Housewives. Truman had embedded himself into the highest levels of Manhattan society, befriending rich, bored socialites he called his swans. This included Babe Paley, Slim Keith, and Gloria Guinness. These were the women everyone wanted to be, and Truman, he was their fabulous little confidant, their gossip queen. And then he betrayed all of them in a thinly veiled scorched earth short story called La Cote Basque, 1965. It was published in Esquire, and I kid you not, he changed almost no fucking names. The story exposed affairs, secrets, abortions, and full-on humiliation. One woman recognized her husband's cheating because she had told Truman about it over martinis at lunch. He thought he was being edgy and brilliant, but his swans never spoke to him again. He was iced out harder than a Negroni on the Upper East Side. Truman went from being the life of a party to a cautionary tale of false friends being bitter enemies. And that wasn't even his first or last act of sabotage. Let's not forget that he basically abandoned Harper Lee, his childhood best friend, once he got famous. She helped him research In Cold Blood, even did the legwork he couldn't, and he barely acknowledged her afterward. Also, this man was so obsessed with being adored that he'd literally start feuds just to stay relevant. Known for saying, "I'm famous for being famous," he basically paved the way for the Kardashians, which is the worst thing he did. If you're shocked about the man who created Holly Golightly was a little shady, babe, come on. Ernest Hemingway, the literary king of toxic masculinity and the human equivalent of a leather boot soaked in whiskey, Mr. I drink, I fish, I shoot things, and I have zero emotions, the man who made a generation of men believe that romantic relationships are only for women and French people. First things first, was Hemingway a gifted writer? Of course. Was he also a nightmare? Definitely. Let's talk about the women. Hemingway was married to count 'em, 4 women. He betrayed each and every one of them. His pattern was to win her over, emotionally destroy her, abandon her like a rhino carcass on a safari. After Pauline, his first wife, became pregnant, he fled with another woman, 'cause gross. To make matters worse, his third wife, Martha Gellhorn, was an absolute badass and a literal war correspondent. However, that didn't sit well with Hemingway. There was only one room for one bad bitch in his household. In order to prevent her from reporting on World War II, he actually attempted to have her press credentials revoked. Martha was the only one of his wives to leave him. She famously said, "I was a writer before I met him and a writer after I left him." He wasn't just a bad husband, he was a bad friend as well. Papa Hemingway was like Regina George with a hangover, and his burn book was a movable feast. But instead of calling his mentor, Gertrude Stein, a fugly slut, he called her a masculine has-been. If he were alive today, you would see him mean-tweeting F. Scott Fitzgerald, who would tweet back that he would like to be excluded from this narrative. So, sorry to ruin your favorite author. I'd like to know who surprised you the most, and what would you like me to ruin next?